The police thought they were stopping a thief, but what they found was a 17-year-old boy with Down syndrome and a car full of cats he was trying to save. What happened next broke everyone's hearts and changed an entire town forever. The small town of Lexington, Nebraska wasn't used to surprises. Life there moved slowly, marked by the hum of tractors in the fields, the clinking of coffee cups in diners, and the laughter of children chasing the last warmth of the evening sun. But one chilly October afternoon, a curious sight made every head on Main Street turn. A silver sedan crawling along at 15 miles per hour, its windows fogged, and its back seat filled with cats. Inside sat Billy Johnson, a 17-year-old with round cheeks, messy brown hair, and the kind of smile that made even the grumpiest store clerk soften. Billy had Down syndrome, but to his mom, his teachers, and anyone who'd spent more than a minute with him, he was simply Billy. Pure-hearted, endlessly curious, and fiercely loving. This was the first week he had his driver's license. It was something he dreamed of for years. Every night before bed, he'd look at a calendar on his wall, counting down the days until he could finally hold those keys in his hand. For Billy, driving meant freedom, not to go anywhere wild or dangerous, but to do the one thing he'd always wanted: save the cats. Ever since he was a little boy, Billy had an unexplainable connection with animals. His mom used to find him sitting on the porch with stray cats curled up on his lap, whispering to them about how someday he'd have a big house full of soft beds and bowls of warm milk for all of them. He called it his cat hotel. So when that license arrived, his photo slightly crooked, his name printed proudly underneath, Billy felt like a superhero who'd just been handed his cape. That morning, he woke up before sunrise, slipped on his blue jacket, and taped a handwritten note to the fridge. "Mom, going to help the cats. Be back for dinner. Love, Billy." Then, with his heart pounding with excitement, he got into the family's old silver sedan and started his mission. It began with one cat, a skinny tabby he'd seen behind the post office. He stopped, gently coaxed it into the car with a can of tuna he'd brought along, and smiled proudly in the rearview mirror. "You're safe now," he whispered. Then he spotted another near the park, then another by the grocery store dumpster. By noon, his car smelled faintly of fur and tuna, and every seat, except his own, was taken by a cat. Some meowed curiously, others purred. Billy sang to them softly as he drove. "Don't worry, little guys. Billy's got you. No one's gonna be cold tonight." But Lexington was a small town, and it didn't take long before people began noticing. A woman outside the bakery blinked in disbelief as the car passed. "Is that 20 cats?" she murmured. Another man laughed as he called the police station. "You're gonna want to see this," he said. "A car full of cats just rolled by. I think the driver's rescuing half the town." Officer Mark Reynolds was on patrol when the call came through. He'd been with the Lexington Police Department for 15 years. A quiet man, steady and kind, with a face that carried both wisdom and weariness. When dispatch told him there was a report of a suspicious vehicle containing multiple felines, he thought it was a prank. But when he turned on Main Street and saw the silver sedan creeping along, he nearly laughed out loud. Through the rear window, he could count at least 24 cats. "Dispatch," he radioed, trying not to chuckle. "I've got eyes on the vehicle. Gonna conduct a welfare check." He flicked on his lights and pulled the car over near the hardware store. Inside, Billy looked in the mirror, eyes wide. The red and blue lights reflected across the cats' curious faces. He bit his lip, his heart thudding. When Officer Reynolds approached the window, Billy rolled it down carefully. "Good afternoon, son," the officer said, smiling softly. "Mind telling me what's going on here?" Billy's eyes were wide, but his tone was cheerful. "Hi, officer. Are you here to help?" "Help? Yeah, there are too many cats out here. I'm taking them to the cat hotel." "Cat hotel?" "My house. Well, not yet, but someday. I'm going to keep them all safe." Mark leaned down, glancing into the car. The back seat was a jungle of fur, tails, and curious eyes. Some of the cats looked familiar. One in particular had a pink collar with rhinestones. "Billy," he said gently, "do you know all these cats?" "Not all their names yet, but they're good cats. Hungry, cold. I can take care of them." The officer smiled faintly, but something in his chest tightened. He'd heard about Billy before. Everyone in town had. The sweet kid who volunteered at the shelter, who waved at every patrol car he saw. He was harmless, loving. But this was a problem. Mark asked Billy to step out of the car and called for animal control. One by one, they checked the cats. Most were strays, but 4 of them weren't. They belong to families who live nearby. When they told Billy, his smile faded. "No," he said quietly. "They were outside. I thought they didn't have anyone." "It's okay," the officer said softly, but Billy's face crumbled. Tears welled in his eyes. "I just wanted to help," he whispered, his voice breaking.
By the time Billy's mother, Karen Johnson, arrived, he was sitting on the curb beside the car, surrounded by carriers and cat fur, staring down at his shoes. When she got out, she hugged him tight, her own eyes wet. "Sweetheart," she murmured, brushing his hair back, "you have the biggest heart in the world, but you can't take other people's pets, okay? They were just out for a walk." Billy nodded, still crying. "I'm sorry, Mom. I just wanted them to be safe. I thought they needed me." Officer Reynolds crouched beside them. "No one's angry, Billy," he said. "You didn't do anything bad. You just cared too much, and that's not a crime." But Billy couldn't stop shaking. "I won't drive again," he whispered. "I don't want to hurt anyone." The officer opened his mouth to reassure him, but Karen placed a hand on his arm. "Give him time," she said quietly. As they drove home, the car felt heavier than it ever had. The cats were gone, the seats were empty, and Billy sat in silence, watching the town pass by. His heart, which had been so full that morning, now felt broken. For weeks after that day, Billy avoided his keys. His license sat on his desk, gathering dust. Whenever his mom offered to take him for a drive, he shook his head. "No, Mom, I'm done. I'm not good at it." But the town didn't forget. In fact, something unexpected began to happen. The story spread, first through Lexington, then across Nebraska. People started calling him the Cat Boy, not as a joke, but with affection. Letters began arriving at his house, small envelopes with little paw prints drawn on them. People thanked Billy for his kindness. They told him about their own pets, about how much the world needed more hearts like his. Still, Billy stayed quiet. He helped around the house, fed the neighbor's dog, but his spark seemed dimmed. Karen worried, though she knew better than to push. Then, one Saturday morning, there was a knock at the door. When Billy opened it, Officer Reynolds stood there, holding a small cardboard box. "Morning, Billy," he said with a grin. "Got a surprise for you." Billy blinked. "For me?" Mark handed him the box. "Open it." Inside, curled up on a blanket, was a tiny orange kitten, barely 8 weeks old, its eyes still sleepy. It looked up at Billy and mewed softly. Billy gasped, his hands trembling. "He's so little," the officer said. "Her name's Daisy. Found her behind the diner last week, thought maybe she needed a good home. Only one condition, though." Billy looked up, wide-eyed. "What?" Mark said gently. "You've got to promise me something. You'll start driving again, not to rescue every cat in town, just so you and Daisy can go on adventures together. Deal?" For the first time in weeks, Billy smiled. Not the small, uncertain kind, but the real, glowing one everyone loved. "Deal," he said. That evening, Karen stood by the window, watching as her son sat in the car, Daisy curled on his lap. The engine wasn't even running. He just sat there, humming softly, showing her all the buttons and knobs. Outside, the sun dipped behind the fields, casting a golden glow across the quiet street. Later, when he finally started the car and pulled down the driveway, Karen wiped a tear from her cheek. She knew he wasn't just driving, he was healing. Months passed, and Billy's confidence returned. He started volunteering again at the animal shelter, but now he worked with a team. He helped build small wooden shelters for stray cats, painted signs that said, "Billy's Cat Haven, all hearts welcome," and made sure every animal had food and water. Officer Reynolds stopped by sometimes to help, still in uniform, rolling up his sleeves and handing Billy tools. The town came together too. Donations, volunteers, kids showing up after school to help build or paint. It wasn't long before the empty lot behind the shelter turned into a real safe space for stray cats. And in the center of it all stood Billy, smiling, with Daisy perched on his shoulder like a tiny orange guardian. One day, a reporter from a local paper came to write a story about the shelter. She asked Billy, "Why do you love cats so much?" Billy thought for a moment, scratching Daisy's ear. Because they need someone, he said simply, and I know what that feels like. There was silence for a moment. Then the reporter smiled through teary eyes. That's beautiful, Billy. A year later, the Lexington Animal Shelter unveiled a new sign at their entrance. Billy's Haven, a place for all lost hearts. At the ceremony, the mayor handed Billy a certificate of appreciation, but the real moment came afterwards, when Officer Reynolds knelt beside him. You did good, kid, he said quietly. Billy grinned. We did well. The officer laughed softly. Yeah, we did. That night, Billy sat on his porch, Daisy asleep on his lap. The stars were out, bright, scattered like tiny wishes across the Nebraska sky. He thought back to that day on Main Street, the flashing lights, the tears, the broken feeling in his chest. And then he looked at Daisy, safe and warm, and smiled. Maybe sometimes mistakes aren't really mistakes. Maybe they're just hearts learning where to go. He leaned back in his chair, whispering, "Good night, little cats out there. Billy's got you covered." And in that quiet town, under that endless sky, a boy with Down syndrome, the one everyone once called the cat thief, had become something much more, a hero of kindness.